Lady Catharina stood at the edge of ruin, 24 hours from losing everything. Her brother's gambling debts, £43,000, had destroyed their family overnight. But the whispers cutting through the ballroom weren't about money. They were about the proposal she'd just received from England's wealthiest marquess, marriage in exchange for her family's salvation. What society didn't know, what even she didn't know yet, was that his Gothic estate harbored secrets darker than bankruptcy. A child's death 3 years ago. A wife's mysterious suicide. And a locked nursery that no one dared enter. The man offering to save her had blood on his hands. The question was, whose blood, and would she be next? Lady Catharina could not breathe. 300 pairs of eyes watched her stand alone against the ballroom wall. The whispers grew louder with each passing second. Gambler's sister, destitute, ruined family. Her brother's debts had destroyed everything. 24 hours until the creditors seized their home. She gripped her fan so tightly the ivory handle threatened to snap. This was her last ball. Tomorrow, the Ashworth name would be nothing but scandal and shame. They say her brother lost £40,000 in one night. The voice drifted from behind a marble column. Poor girl. No dowry, no prospects. Who would marry her now? Catharina's vision blurred, but she refused to let tears fall. Not here. Not in front of them. She thought, how much longer can I pretend my world isn't burning? The question echoed through every person who'd ever carried shame they didn't earn. Every woman who'd stood alone while society sharpened its knives. The orchestra began a waltz. Couples flooded the dance floor, a sea of silk and diamond tiaras swirling to Strauss. She remained frozen against the wall, invisible yet hypervisible, the perfect target for society's cruelty. Inside, she wanted to scream. To run. To disappear into the night and never return. But the Ashworth women didn't run. Even when running was the only sane option. Then he appeared. Marquis Lucian Ashford cut through the crowd like a blade through water. The wealthiest man in England. The coldest heart in London. Every woman wanted him. Every man envied him. His black evening coat fit perfectly across broad shoulders. Dark hair, steel gray eyes that never showed emotion. The scent of sandalwood and leather preceded him, expensive, masculine, utterly controlled. He stopped directly in front of her. The ballroom fell silent. Even the orchestra seemed to pause mid-note. Catharina's heart hammered so loudly she was certain he could hear it. Lady Catharina. His voice was ice over gravel. Dance with me. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Her throat closed. She thought, this is either salvation or another humiliation. With my luck, probably both. My lord, I now. His gloved hand extended. Waiting. Absolute certainty in every line of his posture. She placed her trembling fingers in his palm. The warmth shocked her even through 2 layers of silk gloves. He led her to the center of the floor. Every eye followed. Every fan fluttered with anticipation. The gossips were already composing tomorrow's headlines. His hand settled on her waist, firm, possessive, sending heat through her corset and chemise. They began to move, and Catharina realized with a start, he danced beautifully. Perfectly. As if he'd been born to waltz. You're wondering why, he said quietly, his breath stirring the loose curl near her temple. Why the Marquis of Ashford would dance with the most scandalous woman in the room. Yes. Her voice barely functioned. She thought, and why you smell like heaven when you're clearly the devil? Because I'm going to marry you. The world tilted. She stumbled. His grip tightened, keeping her upright, fingers pressing into the small of her back with surprising gentleness. That's impossible, she whispered. You don't even know me. I know enough. His gray eyes locked onto hers, cold, calculating, revealing nothing. Your family owes £43,000. Your brother faces debtor's prison by Friday. Your mother will be homeless. Your younger sister's debut is destroyed before it begins. Each word was a knife. Precise. Devastating. Delivered without malice, which somehow made it worse. I make it my business to know everything. He spun her smoothly, her emerald skirts swirling like water. I have a proposition. Marriage. Immediate. I pay your brother's debts in full. Your family keeps their home, their name, their dignity. Catharina's mind reeled. This couldn't be real. Men like him didn't rescue girls like her. This was a fairy tale, except the prince looked like he'd never smiled in his life. She thought, there's always a price. Always. What does he want that's worth 43,000 pounds? What do you gain? She asked, proud her voice stayed steady. Something flickered across his face, there and gone so fast she almost missed it. Pain. Deep, bone-crushing pain. Then the mask slammed back. A wife of appropriate breeding. An heir. The end of society's attempts to match me with their vapid daughters. You could choose anyone. A duke's daughter. An heiress. Why me? Why someone ruined by scandal? The music swelled. He pulled her closer, improper, but no one would dare comment. Not when Marquis Ashford did it. The heat of his body seeped through layers of silk and propriety. Because you need me. His words were brutal in their honesty. And women who need me don't ask inconvenient questions about love. Her breath caught. Love. He'd said it like a disease. Like something to be avoided at all costs. What happens next will change everything. A marriage built on desperation, a house hiding deadly secrets, and a love neither of them saw coming. Stay with this story. The twists ahead will leave you breathless. The waltz ended. He released her, stepping back with perfect propriety. I expect your answer by morning. My solicitor will call at 9 o'clock. He bowed, turned, and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the dance floor with every eye in London watching. Catharina stood trembling, the entire ballroom staring. Her world had just been offered salvation by the devil himself. And she had no choice but to accept. The grandfather clock struck 2 in the morning. Catharina paced her small bedroom, still wearing her ball gown, the corset digging into her ribs with every breath. Sleep was impossible. The Marquis's words circled her mind like vultures. Women who need me don't ask inconvenient questions about love. She pressed her palm against the cold window glass, watching fog roll through London streets. Outside, the city slept, unaware that her entire existence balanced on a single decision. She thought, is this what drowning feels like? Choosing between impossible futures? At least in drowning, you eventually stop struggling. This endless weighing of terrible options, this was its own special torture. Marriage. To a stranger. A man whose eyes held winter itself. But what choice did she have? Downstairs, she heard her mother crying. The soft, muffled sound that came every night now since father died and Thomas gambled away their future. Her younger sister Caroline was only 16, a sweet, innocent Caroline who deserved her season, her debut, her chance at happiness. Who deserved to not grow old caring for an impoverished mother in a rented room somewhere. All of it gone. Unless Catharina said yes to a man who spoke of marriage like a business transaction. Who smelled of sandalwood and looked like a Greek statue come to life. Who probably had ice water in his veins instead of blood. She thought, I wonder if he ever laughs. Or if smiling would crack that perfect face like porcelain. The absurd thought almost made her giggle, hysteria creeping in around the edges of exhaustion. A knock at her door made her jump. Catharina? Her mother's voice was hoarse from weeping. May I enter? Of course, Mama. Lady Ashworth entered, a ghost of her former elegance. Her dressing gown was 3 years old, fraying at the cuffs. Gray streaked through hair that had once been honeygold. Candlelight carved shadows under her eyes, grief and worry aging her before her time. You should be sleeping. So should you. Her mother sat on the bed, patting the space beside her. The mattress creaked, they'd sold the good one months ago. Catharina obeyed, sinking onto the worn coverlet. They'd already sold the good linens. And the silver. And the paintings. Everything of value had been fed to Thomas's gambling addiction piece by piece. Tonight at the ball, her mother began carefully, "I saw you dance with the Marquis." Catharina's throat tightened. Everyone saw. And I heard what society whispered after. Her mother took her hand, fingers thin and fragile. "They said he never dances. That he's refused every eligible lady in London for 3 years. Yet he chose you. He made me an offer, Mama." The words felt like swallowing glass. Marriage. In exchange for paying Thomas's debts. Her mother went very still. Only the candle flame moved, dancing shadows across the peeling wallpaper. Marriage. He would settle everything. The creditors, the house, Caroline's debut. Everything. Catharina's voice cracked. We'd be safe. Silence stretched between them. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Life continuing, oblivious. "Do you love him?" her mother asked quietly. Catharina laughed, a bitter, broken sound that didn't belong to a girl of 23. "I don't even know him. And he made it quite clear he doesn't want love. Just an appropriate wife. An heir. A convenient arrangement." She thought, like hiring a housekeeper, except the housekeeper has to share his bed. How romantic. My darling girl. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, catching candlelight like tiny stars. You deserve so much more than convenient. But Caroline deserves her future. You deserve to keep your home. Thomas deserves not to rot in prison, even though part of me thinks rotting might teach him something. Catharina stood, unable to sit still, pacing the tiny room in 3 steps. What I deserve stopped mattering the moment he lost £43,000 at cards. We could find another way, there is no other way. The words burst out, sharp and desperate. We've sold everything. The silver, the horses, father's watch collection, grandmother's jewelry. We have nothing left. And tomorrow morning, the Marquis's solicitor arrives at 9 o'clock for my answer. She pressed her palms against her eyes. 9 o'clock, Mama. That's 7 hours to decide the rest of my life. Her mother rose, crossing to embrace her. Catharina melted into the hug, breathing in the familiar lavender scent, now mixed with the cheaper soap they'd been forced to buy. For a moment, she was a child again, safe, protected, loved. Before everything fell apart. If you say yes, her mother whispered against her hair, promise me one thing. Promise you'll fight for your own happiness. Even in a loveless marriage, find moments of joy. Find pieces of yourself he cannot take. Catharina pulled back, studying her mother's lined face. Did you have to do that? With father? A sad smile. Your father and I married for love. But every woman must learn to protect her heart, darling. Even from men who mean well. She cupped Catharina's cheek with papery soft fingers. Especially from men who mean nothing at all. After her mother left, Catharina returned to the window. Dawn approached, a thin line of gray bleeding across the horizon like a wound. In 3 hours, the solicitor would arrive. In 3 hours, she would seal her fate. She thought of the Marquis's face. That perfect, cold mask. Those gray eyes that revealed nothing. What kind of man proposes marriage to a stranger? What kind of man speaks of love like poison? And what did it say about her that she found him devastatingly handsome despite the emotional tundra he called a personality? The sky lightened. Pink and gold crept across the darkness, beautiful and merciless. Morning came whether you were ready or not. Somewhere in London, in his massive Mayfair mansion, the Marquis was probably sleeping peacefully. Why wouldn't he? He'd made a business deal. Nothing more. But Catharina wouldn't sleep. Not tonight. Possibly never again. At 8:45, she descended the stairs in her simplest morning dress, gray muslin, high collar, no ornamentation. If she was to be sold, she wouldn't dress for the occasion. The irony of wearing mourning gray to sign marriage contracts wasn't lost on her. The doorbell rang at precisely 9 o'clock. Her future had arrived on time. The marriage contract was signed by noon, ink still wet when the solicitor blotted it, sealing her fate with red wax. Catharina became the Marchioness of Ashford in a quiet ceremony 3 days later. No guests, no flowers, no pretense of joy. Just cold efficiency in a registry office that smelled of dust, old parchment, and broken dreams. Her husband kissed her cheek at the altar. His lips were ice against her flushed skin. The carriage ride to Ashford Hall took 4 hours. They sat opposite each other in silence heavy enough to suffocate. Catharina watched the countryside blur past, green fields giving way to darker forests, civilization fading into isolation. The Marquis read documents, his face an unreadable mask, occasionally making notes with a gold pen that probably cost more than her family's annual income. She thought, I've married a statue. A beautiful, breathing statue who will share my bed but never my heart. How many women throughout history had felt this exact loneliness sitting across from their legal owner? How many had watched their husband read business papers on their wedding day and wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake? The silence stretched. She counted trees. Counted fence posts. Counted the ways her life had gone catastrophically wrong. Finally, desperation made her speak. Do you always work? She asked. Even on your wedding day? He glanced up, surprise flickering across his features as if he'd forgotten she was there. These contracts won't review themselves. Of course not. She thought, God forbid the Marquis spend 5 minutes making conversation with his new wife. That might require actual human emotion. When Ashford Hall finally appeared through the trees, Catharina's breath caught. The estate was massive, a Gothic manor of grey stone that seemed to devour sunlight rather than reflect it. Towers stretched toward storm clouds gathering overhead like accusing fingers. Windows stared like empty eyes, dark and unwelcoming. Gargoyles leered from corners. The whole structure looked like it had been designed by someone who'd read too many Gothic novels and thought, yes, I'll live in the villain's lair. Welcome home, the Marquis said flatly, without looking at her. Home. The word felt like a lie wrapped in barbed wire. The staff lined up to greet them, 30 servants in perfect formation, faces carefully neutral. The housekeeper, Mrs. Hollowell, was a stern woman of 60 with silver hair pulled into a merciless bun that probably gave her headaches. Her expression revealed nothing, but her eyes assessed Catharina like livestock at market. Mrs. Hollowell will show you to your chambers, the Marquis announced, already turning away. Dinner is at 8 o'clock. Don't be late. He strode away toward the east wing before Catharina could respond, boot heels echoing on marble floors like a death march. She watched him disappear around a corner and thought, well, that's married life, then. Spectacular. Mrs. Hollowell's mouth tightened into a line so thin it nearly disappeared. This way, my lady. The interior was as cold as its master. Dark wood paneling absorbed light like a black hole. Portraits of dead Ashfords glared from every wall, generations of stern faces judging her inadequacy. Their eyes followed her progress up the stairs. The air tasted of beeswax, dust, and secrets that had been locked away so long they'd started to rot. She thought, if this house could talk, it would probably scream. And then laugh at me for being here. Your chambers connect to his lordship's through that door, Mrs. Hollowell said, gesturing to a mahogany door as they climbed the grand staircase. Each step creaked ominously. He has instructed it remain locked unless he summons you. Catharina's cheeks burned. Summons. Like a servant. Like property. I see. His lordship values his privacy. The housekeeper's tone suggested this was reasonable, not insulting. Her bedroom was enormous, unnecessarily so, as if someone had tried to fill emptiness with square footage. A four-poster bed dominated the space, draped in burgundy velvet that probably cost enough to feed a village. A fireplace crackled, but the warmth couldn't penetrate the chill seeping from the stone walls. French windows overlooked gardens gone wild with neglect, roses choking on their own thorns, hedges grown monstrous, beauty consumed by abandonment. She thought, even the flowers here are miserable. Perfect. If you require anything, ring. Mrs. Hollowell turned to leave, clearly eager to escape. Wait. Catharina's voice stopped her. The portrait in the entrance hall, the woman with dark hair and sad eyes. Who was she? The housekeeper's face went blank as fresh parchment. That was the First Lady Ashford, my lady. She passed 3 years ago. How did she die? A long pause. Too long. The air grew heavy with things unsaid. I'm afraid that's not my place to discuss. His lordship prefers we don't speak of it. But surely, his lordship prefers we don't speak of it. Firmer this time. Final. Before Catharina could press further, Mrs. Hollowell disappeared into the corridor like smoke. Alone, Catharina explored her gilded cage. The wardrobe held new gowns, expensive, fashionable, chosen without her input. Someone had guessed her measurements perfectly. Silk and satin and lace that probably cost more than her family's house. Everything a wife might need, except warmth or welcome or any indication her husband cared she existed. She opened the connecting door to her husband's room. Locked, as promised. She pressed her ear against the wood. Silence. That night, dinner was excruciating. The dining room could seat 40, they sat at opposite ends like strangers at a funeral. 20 feet of polished mahogany stretched between them. Crystal clinked. Servants served course after course in oppressive silence: turtle soup, roast pheasant, asparagus in butter, wine that tasted like crushed dreams. How was your afternoon? Catharina attempted, voice echoing in the cavernous space. Productive. The Marquis cut his roast with surgical precision, each movement controlled. The estate is impressive. Yes. Do you ever give tours to? No? Conversation died a painful death. She focused on her plate, appetite gone, counting the ways this was worse than poverty. At least when she was poor, people talked to her. Later, alone in her enormous bed, Catharina couldn't sleep. The house made noises, settling, groaning, whispering secrets in languages she didn't speak. Around midnight, she heard footsteps in the corridor. She crept to her door, opening it a crack. The Marquis walked past, fully dressed, carrying a lantern that cast his shadow huge and monstrous against the walls. His face was haunted, pain cracking through his usual mask like ice breaking on a frozen lake. He moved like a ghost, heading toward the north wing. She thought, I should leave him alone. Whatever demons he's visiting, they're none of my business. But curiosity, or perhaps desperation for any human connection, propelled her forward. She followed, bare feet silent on cold floors, nightgown whispering around her ankles. He led her through shadowed hallways, deeper into the house. Finally, he stopped before a door she hadn't noticed before. His hand touched the wood with trembling fingers, then his forehead pressed against it. His shoulders shook. Catharina's heart clenched. This was grief. Raw, overwhelming grief that had no end. He whispered something too quiet to hear, then turned away, walking back the way he'd come. Catharina pressed herself into an alcove, hidden behind a velvet curtain that smelled of mothballs. He passed within inches, and she saw his face clearly in the lantern glow. Tears streaked his cheeks. After he disappeared, she approached the mysterious door. A small brass plaque read, "Nursery." She tried the handle. Locked, of course. But through the keyhole, she glimpsed painted walls, cheerful yellows and blues, sunshine colors that had no place in this gray house. A rocking horse stood frozen mid-gallop, waiting for a rider who would never return. Toys scattered across the floor as if a child had just left them. Books stacked beside a small chair. As if time itself had stopped. Thunder rumbled outside. Rain began to fall, tapping against windows like fingernails of the dead. Catharina stood alone in the dark corridor, staring at a locked door that held answers to questions she hadn't known to ask. What tragedy haunted this house? What had the First Lady Ashford done or failed to do? And why did her husband cry in the middle of the night over a nursery that should have been packed away years ago? The truth waited behind that door. And suddenly, Catharina understood, she hadn't married a cold man. She'd married a broken one. Which was somehow infinitely worse. The scream shattered the night. Catharina jolted awake, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. For a moment, she couldn't place the sound: animal, human, something between. Then it came again. Raw. Agonized. The sound of someone trapped in hell with no escape. Coming from the Marquess's chambers. She was at the connecting door before conscious thought caught up. Still locked. But the screaming continued, wordless, desperate, primal. She thought, this is what nightmares sound like when they claw their way into reality. No servants appeared despite the noise echoing through stone corridors. Perhaps they'd learned not to interfere. Perhaps they were too afraid of what they'd find. She ran into the corridor, nightgown billowing behind her like a ghost. His door was unlocked this time, finally, a small mercy. She burst through. The Marquis thrashed in his massive bed, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets that looked like shrouds. His face contorted in terror, eyes shut tight, jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth, tendons standing out in his neck like ropes. No, he gasped. Not the water. Please, not the water. He's only 4. Only 4, Catharina froze. 4. A child. The toys in the nursery. The locked door. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. My lord! She rushed to the bedside, hands hovering uselessly. Should she wake him? Touch him? What if he lashed out? Lucian! His eyes snapped open, wild, unseeing, pupils blown wide with terror. His hand shot out faster than a striking snake, gripping her wrist with crushing force that made bones grind. Where is he? Where's William? She thought, so that's the name. William. The ghost who haunts this house has a name. You're dreaming, she said quickly, trying to keep her voice calm despite the pain shooting up her arm. It's a nightmare. You're safe. You're in your room. It's 1844. You're safe. Recognition slowly returned to his gray eyes like fog lifting. The grip loosened. He released her, staring at his own hand as if it had betrayed him. Horror dawned across his features. Catharina. Her name was barely audible, scraped raw. Did I hurt you? She rubbed her wrist, already feeling bruises forming in the shape of his fingers. 5 perfect marks of his terror. Who's William? He went rigid. The vulnerability vanished like smoke and wind, that familiar ice sliding back into place with almost audible clicks. Get out. You were crying for a child, I said get out. The roar echoed off stone walls. But something in his face stopped her from obeying. Not anger. Terror. The terror of a man whose walls were crumbling and who would do anything, even drive away the only person who'd witnessed his breakdown, to rebuild them. She thought, running from broken people is easy. Staying takes courage neither of us might have. She sat on the edge of his bed. Deliberate. Defiant. The mattress dipped under her weight. No. For 3 heartbeats, he simply stared. Then something broke. His shoulders sagged. He looked away, toward the window where dawn was just beginning to bleed across the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscene given the darkness in this room. William was my son. The words were ash in his mouth, bitter and lifeless. He died 3 years ago. Fever, they said. 4 years old. 4 years, 2 months, 16 days. His voice cracked. I could tell you the hours. The minutes. Time stopped that day. Catharina's throat closed. The nursery. The toys left scattered. Time frozen in a moment of loss so profound it had paralyzed an entire household. I'm sorry, she whispered. Inadequate words, but all she had. All anyone ever had in the face of grief this magnitude. Don't. His voice turned sharp as broken glass. Don't give me pity. I don't want it. I don't deserve it. Everyone deserves compassion when they're grieving, you don't understand. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window like a caged wolf. His nightshirt was translucent with sweat, clinging to the lean muscles of his back, revealing the body of a man who'd forgotten to eat regularly for 3 years. It wasn't just fever. It was my fault. The room felt airless. Outside, birds began their morning songs, oblivious to the tragedy being confessed inside. What do you mean? He pressed his palm against the glass, staring out at nothing. When he spoke again, his voice was hollow. I was supposed to be watching him. My wife Eleanor, she was resting. I was in my study, working. Always working. Building my empire. William wanted to play. I told him later. I always told him later. She thought, this is the moment. The crack in his armor wide enough to see the wounded man beneath. Every person who'd ever lost someone knew this guilt, the belief that one different choice could have changed everything. That later was a promise you'd break forever. He went outside alone. The pond behind the rose garden, shallow, barely 18 inches deep. He fell in. Lucian's voice broke like ice cracking. A gardener heard splashing, pulled him out. But he'd been under too long. Water in his lungs. He caught pneumonia that night. The fever came. 3 days later, he was gone. Catharina rose, drawn to him by something stronger than fear or propriety. She stood beside him at the window, not touching but close enough to feel his heat, his pain radiating like a furnace. Dawn painted the world in gentle colors that felt like mockery. You couldn't have known, she said softly. Children are quick. They slip away in seconds. I should have been there. His reflection in the glass was ghostly, haunted. I should have put down the damned ledgers and played with my son. Built him the treehouse he wanted. Taught him to ride properly. Been a father instead of a marquess calculating profits. He laughed bitterly. And for what? So he could drown while I secured our financial future? Brilliant trade. Tears slipped down his face, silent, devastating. He didn't bother wiping them away, as if he'd earned the right to cry and refused to hide it anymore. Eleanor never forgave me. She stopped speaking. Stopped eating. Stopped being. His hands clenched into fists. 6 months later, she took laudanum. Too much. Whether it was accident or... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. The locked nursery. The midnight visits. The marriage of convenience to a woman who wouldn't demand his heart because his heart was buried with a 4-year-old boy and a wife destroyed by grief. She thought, so now I understand. Why he chose me. Why he'll never offer love. He's not cold. He's terrified. Terrified that loving again means losing again. And he can't survive another loss. So now you understand, Lucian said, his voice regaining its coldness even as tears still fell. Why I chose you. Why I'll never offer love. I destroy everything I love. It's safer for everyone if I feel nothing. Before she could respond, he turned to face her fully. The vulnerability was disappearing fast, the mask reforming like ice over water. This conversation never happened. Return to your room. We'll speak no more of it. Lucian, that's an order, Catharina. She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him that grief didn't work that way, that he couldn't lock away pain forever like toys in a nursery, that she understood more than he thought. But the look in his eyes was desperate. Not angry. Desperate. A drowning man pushing away the rope because he thought he deserved to drown. So she left, the taste of his tragedy bitter on her tongue. Back in her room, she pressed her ear against the connecting door. Silence. Then, very faintly, the sound of a man weeping alone in the dark. Dawn broke fully, painting the sky gold and pink. Morning would come. He would be cold again. The walls would be rebuilt higher than before. But Catharina had seen behind them now. And she realized something that terrified her more than anything else. she was beginning to care about this broken, haunted man who'd bought her like property and locked away his heart with his dead son's toys. Beginning to care far more than was safe. 3 weeks passed in strange limbo. The Marquis returned to his cold formality, speaking only when necessary, disappearing for hours into his study, treating her like an expensive piece of furniture he'd acquired and promptly forgotten about. But Catharina noticed small changes that made her heart ache. He no longer locked the connecting door at night. Once, she found a book on her breakfast tray, poetry she'd mentioned loving during one of their stilted dinner conversations. No note. Just the book, its leather cover warm from being carried against someone's chest. Progress, perhaps. Or crumbs thrown to a starving woman who was foolish enough to call them a feast. She thought, I'm becoming one of those pathetic wives who reads meaning into every tiny gesture. Next I'll be swooning over the way he passes the salt. Pathetic, Catharina. Truly. Then the invitation arrived, shattering their fragile equilibrium. We're hosting a dinner party, Lucian announced over breakfast one morning, not looking up from his newspaper. The Times crinkled with each page turn. Saturday evening. 8 guests. You'll need an appropriate gown. Catharina set down her teacup carefully, the china clicking against the saucer. This is rather sudden. Lord Pemberton has business interests I need to secure. His wife enjoys society. Therefore, we play society. His tone was flat, businesslike, as if planning a party was equivalent to reviewing ledgers. Which, for him, it probably was. Who else is attending? A pause. Almost imperceptible, but she'd learned to read his silences. Lady Celeste Hawthorne, among others. The name meant nothing to Catharina, but something in his voice, a tightness, a barely there catch, suggested it should. She thought, here we go. The mysterious past lover. Every Gothic novel has one. Wonderful. Anyone I should know about? She asked, keeping her voice light. No one of consequence. He folded the newspaper with geometric precision, each crease exact. Mrs. Hollowell will arrange everything. Saturday arrived too quickly. The seamstress delivered a gown of emerald silk that made Catharina's skin glow like moonstone and her eyes shine like jade. The color of money, she thought bitterly. How appropriate. I'm dressing up to be displayed like a prize mare at auction. But at least I'm a well-dressed prize mare. Guests began arriving at 7. Catharina stood beside Lucian in the entrance hall, transformed into the perfect Marchioness, poised, smiling, empty. His hand rested at the small of her back, a gesture of possession more than affection. His touch burned through silk and whalebone, a brand she couldn't escape. Lord and Lady Pemberton arrived first, a jovial man with magnificent mutton chops that belonged in a museum and his plump, cheerful wife who reminded Catharina of a friendly hen. Then came the Thorntons, followed by Sir Richard and his quiet sister who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Catharina sympathized. The clock struck 8. One guest remained. The door opened. A woman glided in, and the air itself seemed to shift, thickening, darkening, charged with electricity before a storm. Lady Celeste Hawthorne was stunning in the way that weapons are stunning. 30 perhaps, with raven hair coiled in an elaborate style that must have taken hours. Porcelain skin without a single flaw. Eyes like dark honey that promised sweetness while hiding poison. Her burgundy gown was cut daringly low, improper by a hair's breadth, but just acceptable for a widow. The dress whispered seduce me while her expression said I'll destroy you. Her gaze locked onto Lucian. Something passed between them, recognition, history, hunger, regret tangled into one loaded glance. Catharina's stomach clenched. She thought, oh. So that's what no one of consequence looks like. Brilliant. Lucian. Celeste's voice was honey and smoke, bourbon at midnight, promises in silk sheets. It's been too long. Lady Hawthorne. His tone was carefully neutral, but his hand tightened almost imperceptibly on Catharina's back. A tell. He wasn't as unaffected as he pretended. May I present my wife, Lady Catharina Ashford? Celeste's eyes slid to Catharina with the speed of a knife finding flesh. Assessment. Dismissal. Judgment rendered in seconds. A smile that didn't reach her eyes or her soul, if she had one. Of course. The new Marchioness. How unexpected your marriage was. The word hung like poison gas. Unexpected. Meaning, beneath him. Meaning, scandalous. Meaning, I know things you don't, little girl, and I'll use them to cut you open. Dinner was torture refined into art form. Someone should give awards for this level of suffering, Catharina thought. Most excruciating meal, and we'd win platinum. Celeste positioned herself directly across from Lucian, monopolizing conversation with reminiscences of old times. Shared jokes that excluded everyone else. Private smiles that screamed intimacy. The casual familiarity of people who'd once been far more than friends. Who'd shared beds and secrets and futures that never materialized. Do you remember the summer at Brighton, Lucian? Celeste laughed, touching her throat where a diamond necklace glittered obscenely. Each stone probably cost more than Catharina's family home. When we watched the sun rise from the cliffs? You said it was the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen. He didn't respond, focusing intently on his wineglass as if it held the secrets of the universe. Catharina pushed food around her plate, appetite gone, replaced by nausea. She thought, this woman loved him. Perhaps still loves him. And what did he feel? What does he feel now? Does he look at her and remember sunshine while looking at me and seeing obligation? The roast tasted like ash. The wine like vinegar. Every bite was torture. Tell me, Lady Catharina, Celeste's voice sharpened, drawing attention like a blade catching light. How did you and Lucian meet? The wedding was so private. One might almost call it secretive. The table fell silent. Every guest suddenly fascinated by their silverware, their napkins, anything but the carnage about to unfold. We met in London, Catharina said carefully, each word measured. The circumstances were, her brother gambled away the family fortune, Celeste interrupted sweetly, voice dripping false sympathy. £43,000, wasn't it? And Lucian, ever the white knight, swept in to rescue her. So romantic. Marriage as debt payment. Like a fairy tale, really. If the fairy tale involved bankruptcy and desperation. Blood roared in Catharina's ears. The humiliation was surgical, every word chosen to wound precisely, to expose, to strip away dignity with the efficiency of a butcher. Lady Pemberton gasped. Sir Richard coughed uncomfortably into his napkin. The Thorntons suddenly found their plates fascinating. Lucian's voice cut through the shocked silence like ice through flesh. That's enough, Celeste. But darling, I'm merely stating facts. She leaned forward, candlelight dancing across her face like hellfire. Everyone knows the real reason you married her. A convenient bride who'd never ask difficult questions. Never demand what you can't give. Her smile turned cruel, surgical. Unlike some of us. The air crackled with tension so thick it could be cut with a knife and served as another course. Catharina wanted to flee. To disappear. To be anywhere but trapped in this chair while her marriage was dissected for entertainment. While this beautiful monster exposed every insecurity, every doubt, every fear she tried to bury. But something else rose inside her. Not shame. Fury. White-hot, purifying fury. She thought, no. No more. I didn't survive poverty and scandal just to let some bitter woman who lost him years ago make me feel small. You're quite right, Lady Hawthorne, Catharina said, her voice steady as steel despite the storm inside. Our marriage was unconventional. But I've learned something important, convention often masks cowardice. My husband chose honesty over pretense. He offered me a bargain, no lies, no false romance, no promises neither of us could keep. That takes more courage than 1,000 romantic sunrises that fade the moment real life arrives. Celeste's smile froze, cracking like porcelain. Lucian's head turned sharply toward Catharina. For one heartbeat, she saw surprise ripple across his features. Then something else. Respect. Pride. Heat that had nothing to do with anger. The dinner limped to conclusion like a wounded animal finally putting itself out of misery. Guests departed with awkward farewells, pretending they hadn't witnessed spectacular drama. They'd dine on this story for months. Finally, only Celeste remained, lingering in the entrance hall while a footman fetched her cloak. A spider reluctant to leave her web. She stepped close to Lucian, too close for propriety, invading his space with practiced ease. Her perfume, jasmine and something darker, musk maybe, filled the air between them, thick and cloying. "You're making a mistake," she whispered, just loud enough for Catharina to hear from the stairs. "She's not Eleanor. She'll never be what you need." "You don't know what I need." "Don't I?" Her hand touched his chest, intimate, possessive, a claim staked on territory she'd lost years ago. "I know exactly what haunts you at night. I know about William. About Eleanor. About the guilt that eats you alive. And I know she can never understand. Not like I do." Before Lucian could respond, Celeste turned toward Catharina on the stairs. Her smile was pure venom, distilled malice in human form. "Such a pretty dress, Lady Ashford. Emerald suits you. Though I wonder, does he look at you the way he once looked at her? At Eleanor?" She paused at the door, delivering the final cut. "Or does he close his eyes and pretend you're someone else? Someone worth loving?" She left in a swirl of burgundy silk and jasmine perfume and calculated cruelty. The door closed. Silence crashed down like a collapsing building. Lucian stood frozen, his back to Catharina. His hands were fists at his sides, knuckles white, trembling with suppressed emotion. "Lucian, don't." His voice was strangled, barely human. "Just don't." He walked away toward his study. The door slammed hard enough to rattle paintings on the walls. Catharina sank onto the stairs, emerald silk pooling around her like spilled poison. Her hands trembled. That woman knew him. Had loved him. Perhaps still did. And the worst part, the absolutely unbearable part, was the terrible suspicion taking root like weeds in her heart. What if Celeste was right? What if Catharina was just a placeholder? A convenient body to fill Eleanor's empty space while he mourned the wife he'd actually loved? She looked up at the portrait gallery. Every painting of Eleanor had been turned to face the wall. Hiding her. Or hiding from her. Either way, the message was clear: the dead still ruled this house. And Catharina was just a living ghost haunting rooms that belonged to someone else. Catharina woke to fire in her veins. Her throat burned like she'd swallowed hot coals. Her head pounded like horses galloping through her skull in iron-shod hooves. When she tried to sit up, the room spun violently, walls tilting, ceiling becoming floor. She collapsed back onto pillows drenched with sweat that smelled of fever and fear. "Mrs. Hollowell," she tried to call, but her voice was a broken whisper, barely audible over her own ragged breathing. The door opened. Not the housekeeper. Lucian. He froze in the doorway, still dressed from the disastrous dinner party hours ago. His cravat was loosened, waistcoat unbuttoned, the most disheveled she'd ever seen him. Hair falling across his forehead. Eyes red-rimmed. He looked human. Breakable. "Catharina?" "I'm fine." Even delirious with fever, she tried to maintain dignity. "Pride was the last thing they couldn't take from you." "Just tired," she never finished. The fever dragged her under like a riptide, pulling her down into darkness where Celeste's laugh echoed endlessly. Time became fluid, meaningless. She surfaced occasionally into consciousness, glimpses of lamplight painting shadows on walls, cool cloths on her forehead that felt like mercy, voices murmuring words she couldn't quite grasp. Then darkness would claim her again, pulling her down into nightmares where she drowned in emerald silk while Celeste stood on shore laughing, and Lucian turned away, always turning away. She thought in her delirium, this is what dying feels like. Slow and hot and lonely even when people surround you. When true awareness finally returned, weak afternoon sunlight filtered through curtains like honey. Her nightgown clung uncomfortably to her skin, sticky with dried sweat. Her mouth tasted like copper and ash and 3 days of illness. Every muscle ached. And Lucian sat beside her bed. Not standing at a respectful distance. Not awkwardly hovering near the door. Sitting in a chair pulled close enough to touch, his head tilted back in exhausted sleep. Dark stubble shadowed his jaw, 3 days' worth at least. His shirt was wrinkled beyond salvation, sleeves rolled to his elbows revealing forearms she'd never seen before. A book lay open on his lap, pages worn soft from repeated handling, poetry. She thought, how long has he been here? Hours? Days? The fierce, untouchable Marquis, rumpled and human and keeping vigil beside my sickbed like I actually matter. The realization made her chest ache in ways that had nothing to do with fever. She shifted slightly, sheets rustling. The movement woke him instantly, gray eyes snapping open with the alertness of someone who'd spent days on edge. You're awake. Relief flooded his face before he could mask it, raw, overwhelming, beautiful in its honesty. Thank God. The fever broke this morning, but the doctor said, he stopped, running a hand through disheveled hair that stood up in directions that would horrify his valet. How do you feel? Like I was trampled by horses. Her voice was rough as sandpaper, painful to use. Then the horses backed up and trampled me again. Possibly a third time. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. That's specific. How long? 3 days. He poured water from a pitcher, the sound of liquid filling glass somehow intimate in the quiet room. Supporting her head with surprising gentleness, he helped her drink. His hand was warm against her neck, fingers careful not to press too hard. Influenza. Half the servants are sick. You were the worst. 3 days. He'd been here 3 days. She could see it in the exhaustion carved into his face, the worried creases around his eyes. You stayed, she whispered. Something flickered in his eyes. Vulnerability breaking through like sunrise through clouds. I couldn't leave. Not after, he broke off, setting down the glass with unnecessary care. Mrs. Hollowell changed your clothes, of course. I merely read to you. The doctor said familiar voices might help. He looked away, toward the window. I hoped it would work. What did you read? He picked up the book, worn leather, pages soft as silk from repeated handling, spine cracked from love. Wordsworth. You mentioned loving his work at dinner once. I thought. His voice roughened like sand over stone. When William was sick, Eleanor used to read to him. Poetry, fairy tales, anything to comfort him. He found solace in voices. I hoped it might work for you too. The admission hung between them, the small offering of his grief, transformed into care for her. A gift wrapped in tragedy. She thought, this is what intimacy looks like. Not grand gestures, but sitting vigil. Not poetry about love, but poetry read to keep someone tethered to life. Thank you, Catharina said softly, her throat tight with emotion that had nothing to do with illness. For staying. For reading. For not letting me die alone in this mausoleum. You weren't going to die. The words were fierce, almost angry. I wouldn't allow it. A real smile this time, small but genuine. Commanding even death itself? Very Marquis of you. He almost smiled back. Almost. The corners of his mouth twitched before his expression sobered like clouds covering sun. About the dinner party. What Celeste said, don't. Catharina closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her. Not now. I'm too weak to pretend I'm not hurt by it. Too tired for brave faces. Silence stretched. She expected him to leave, to retreat behind his walls now that she was conscious and the crisis had passed. Expected the cold Marquis to return, replacing this rumpled, worried man. Instead, his hand found hers on the coverlet. Tentative. Warm. Real. His fingers interlaced with hers, the first time he'd touched her with tenderness instead of duty, with choice instead of obligation. She was wrong, he said quietly, voice barely above a whisper. What she implied. About closing my eyes and pretending. I don't do that. You're nothing like Eleanor. She was. He paused, choosing words carefully like stepping through a minefield. Eleanor was gentle. Fragile. She needed protecting from the world, from herself. You're different. You have steel underneath the silk. You defended our marriage when I was too shocked to speak. You're still here despite every reason to flee. Catharina's throat tightened. Maybe I'm just stubborn. Maybe. His thumb traced slow circles on her wrist, just above where bruises from his nightmare grip had faded to yellow ghosts. Or maybe you're braver than any of us deserve. For long moments, they simply existed together. His hand in hers. The sound of their breathing synchronizing. Sunlight painting patterns on the coverlet like lace. Nothing dramatic. Nothing perfect. Just two damaged people finding unexpected comfort in the space between words. She thought, this is dangerous. This tenderness. Because I could fall in love with this version of him, the one who reads poetry and keeps vigil and admits vulnerability. And then what happens when the walls go back up? Then he spoke again, so quietly she almost missed it. Celeste and I were engaged. 5 years ago, before Eleanor. Her father broke it off when he found a wealthier match, an earl with ships and property in 3 countries. She married Lord Hawthorne for his title and fortune, not love. After Eleanor died, Celeste, she thought I would welcome her back with open arms. She didn't understand that I can't. His voice cracked like ice. I can't love like that anymore. It destroys everything. Everyone. So you married me. Someone who wouldn't expect love. Yes. His hand tightened on hers, desperate. But that doesn't mean I don't. He stopped. Started again. These 3 days, watching you fight the fever, I realized something terrifying. I care whether you live or die. I care more than is safe. More than I intended. More than I know how to handle. Her heart stuttered. This was it, the moment when the armor truly cracked. When she glimpsed not just his grief, but something new. Something fragile and growing, a green shoot pushing through frozen ground. Before she could respond, a knock shattered the intimacy like glass. Mrs. Hollowell entered, saw their joined hands, and her eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. My lord, a letter arrived. Marked urgent. Lucian released Catharina's hand reluctantly, each finger pulling away slowly as if he might never touch her again. He took the envelope. His face went pale as milk as he read, all blood draining away. What is it? Catharina asked, fear crawling up her spine. He looked up, and the terror in his eyes stopped her breath. Made her forget her own weakness. It's a blackmail letter. The letter trembled in Lucian's hands. Black ink on cheap paper, anonymous, brutal, calculated. The truth about William Ashford's death was no accident. £5,000 by Friday or all of London learns what really happened at the pond. Your career, your name, your freedom all forfeit. Wait for further instructions. Catharina's blood turned cold despite the fever still warming her skin. She thought, of course. Of course something else had to go wrong. Because 3 days of influenza wasn't dramatic enough. That's impossible. You said it was an accident. It was. But doubt crept into his voice, thin, poisonous, corrosive. He fell. The gardener found him. There was nothing suspicious. Nothing that suggested. He stopped, rereading the letter as if different words might appear. Then why would someone claim otherwise? Lucian stood abruptly, pacing like a caged wolf, each step precise despite his exhaustion. The floorboards creaked under his weight. Because they know I'll pay anything to protect William's memory. Anything to keep his name from being dragged through scandal. They're counting on my grief to make me stupid. She pushed herself upright despite her weakness, ignoring the spinning room and protesting muscles. We should contact the authorities, no. The word was absolute, final as a closing coffin lid. No police. No investigation. If this becomes public, every gossip in London will feast on it like vultures on carrion. They'll invent theories. Accuse me of negligence. Of murder. His voice broke like thin ice. They'll say I killed my own son for his inheritance. For freedom. For 1,000 invented reasons. The fear in his eyes was primal, stripped of all aristocratic polish. She thought, this is what terror looks like when it wears a marquess's face. When the thing you've buried claws its way back to destroy everything you have left. What will you do? She asked quietly. Pay. He crumpled the letter in his fist, knuckles white. I'll pay whatever they want. William's memory is worth more than money. More than pride. More than anything. After he left, Catharina lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting cracks in the plaster. Something nagged at her, a wrongness she couldn't name, an itch she couldn't scratch. The letter's timing felt calculated. 3 days after Celeste's visit. 3 days after that venomous dinner party where she demonstrated intimate knowledge of Lucian's pain. Your career, your name, your freedom. Why mention freedom? Why threaten prison unless there was actual evidence of wrongdoing? Unless someone knew something real. Or wanted Lucian to believe they did. Against all reason, suspicion bloomed like poisonous flowers. What if this wasn't random? What if someone with intimate knowledge of Lucian's guilt and grief was orchestrating this? Someone who'd been in the house before. Someone who knew where all the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. Someone like Celeste. The thought took root, growing tendrils of certainty that wrapped around her mind. Celeste knew about William. Knew about Eleanor's suicide. Knew exactly where to press to make Lucian bleed money and dignity. And she'd made her intentions crystal clear at dinner. She wanted him back. Wanted his new wife gone. What better way than to bankrupt him emotionally and financially? She thought, I could be wrong. Probably am wrong. But what if I'm right? What if letting him pay means letting a murderer win? Catharina waited until the house slept, until even the servants' footsteps faded. Her legs trembled as she dressed, still weak from 3 days of fever, but determination burned hotter than illness. She couldn't let Lucian pay blackmail to a woman who might be manipulating his grief for revenge and profit. She had to know the truth. The servants' quarters were dark and silent as tombs. Catharina crept toward the east wing, toward the room where Mrs. Hollowell had mentioned the estate records were kept. If there was anything suspicious about William's death, there would be documentation. Doctors' reports. Witness statements. Something that didn't add up. The door was unlocked, careless or intentional, she didn't know. Moonlight through tall windows illuminated rows of filing cabinets like metal sentinels. She found the drawer marked 1842 to 1843, the year William died. Her fingers flew through folders, each rustling page too loud in the oppressive silence. Finally, William James Ashford, deceased May 17, 1843. She pulled the file, heart hammering against her ribs. Inside, doctor's certificate, stating pneumonia following water aspiration. The gardener's statement, Thomas Beckett, age 47. He'd heard splashing, found the boy face down in 18 inches of water. Performed resuscitation. Child was breathing but unconscious. Developed fever that night. Died 3 days later. Nothing suspicious. Nothing to blackmail anyone over. Just tragedy, documented in bureaucratic precision. She dug deeper, refusing to accept this dead end. Another document, tucked beneath the others like a secret. A letter, dated 2 weeks after William's death. Written in Eleanor's shaking hand, ink blotted with tears, Dr. Whitmore, I must speak with you privately. Something about William's death troubles me deeply. The gardener's story doesn't align with what I saw that morning from my window. I cannot rest until I understand what truly happened. Please come at your earliest convenience. The truth matters more than my comfort. Catharina's hands went numb. Eleanor had suspected something. But what? And why was this letter never sent? The wax seal was unbroken, pristine. as if someone had intercepted it before it reached the doctor. Footsteps in the corridor. She shoved everything back into the folder with shaking hands, extinguished her candle, and pressed herself behind a filing cabinet. Cold metal bit into her back. The door opened. Lamplight spilled across the floor like liquid gold. Mrs. Hollowell entered, moving with purpose that belied her age. She went directly to the same filing cabinet, the one containing William's records. From her apron pocket, she withdrew a sealed envelope identical to the blackmail letter's style and paper. Catharina's breath stopped. Her heart stopped. The world stopped. The housekeeper placed the envelope in the folder, locked the cabinet with a key from her chatelaine, and left as silently as she'd come. Catharina waited 5 agonizing minutes before emerging on trembling legs. Her mind raced like a runaway carriage. Mrs. Hollowell was involved? But why? She'd served the family for decades, been loyal through Eleanor's death and Lucian's grief. Unless she was being paid by someone else. Someone who needed inside access to the house, to its secrets, to its vulnerable Marquis. Someone who could orchestrate an entire campaign of psychological warfare from the outside while having a spy on the inside. Celeste. She thought, I need proof. Real, undeniable proof before I accuse anyone. Because if I'm wrong, I'll destroy innocent people. And if I'm right, I'm dealing with someone who's already killed twice. Catharina returned to her room as dawn painted the sky bleeding pink. Exhaustion dragged at her, but her mind buzzed with dangerous knowledge. Eleanor's unsent letter. The gardener's statement. Mrs. Hollowell's midnight activities. And underneath it all, the terrible question, what if William's death truly wasn't an accident? A knock made her jump, nerves already frayed. A maid entered with breakfast and a sealed note. The paper smelled of jasmine, cloying, sweet, unmistakable. Meet me at the old gamekeeper's cottage. Noon. Come alone. I know what happened to your husband's son. I have proof Eleanor suspected murder. A friend. Every instinct screamed trap. This was too convenient, too perfectly timed. But if Celeste truly knew something, if she held evidence that could clear Lucian or condemn him, Catharina had to know. Had to see whatever proof existed. She thought, this is how women throughout history have walked into danger. Not from stupidity, but from love. From the desperate need to protect someone who might not even want protecting. From the belief that truth matters more than safety. At 11:30, she borrowed a cloak and slipped out through the garden. Her legs still trembled from fever, but adrenaline kept her moving. The gamekeeper's cottage sat a mile from the main house through dense woods, abandoned for years. Ivy devoured its walls like hungry mouths. Windows stared like blind eyes. The whole structure looked ready to collapse into itself. The door was ajar. Ominous. Deliberate. Lady Hawthorne? Catharina called, voice swallowed by forest silence. I received your note. Silence. Then, from the shadows, did you really think it would be that simple? A man's voice. Unfamiliar. Rough as gravel. Catharina spun toward the door, too late. It slammed shut with the finality of a coffin closing. A key turned in the lock. Metal scraping metal, sealing her fate. The Marquis will pay handsomely for his wife's return, the voice continued from outside, muffled through old wood. Even more than he'd pay for his son's secrets. You've made this very profitable, my lady. Very profitable indeed. Footsteps receded through undergrowth. She was alone in darkness that smelled of rot and abandonment. Trapped. She thought, I'm going to die here. In a gamekeeper's cottage, killed by my own stupidity and desperate love for a man who might never have loved me back. Catharina's hands scraped along rotting walls, searching for weakness in the darkness. Splinters bit into her palms like tiny teeth. Her breath came in short gasps, not panic, not yet, but the edge of it looming like a cliff in fog. She thought, I've been so monumentally stupid. Walking into a trap like some naive heroine in a penny dreadful. Mother would be so disappointed. I raised you better than this, Catharina. Well, apparently not, mother. A window. High up, boarded over with planks gray with age. She dragged a broken chair beneath it, testing its stability. The wood groaned under her weight, protesting but holding. Through gaps in the boards, she glimpsed forest. No house visible. No help coming. Just trees and silence and her own stupidity echoing in the dark. She pushed against the boards. One shifted slightly, nails rusted through decades of neglect. She pushed harder, ignoring the screaming muscles in her fever-weakened arms. The board cracked, falling outward with a satisfying crash. Daylight streamed through the gap like salvation. Freedom. Almost. If she could just, then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Multiple riders approaching fast, branches snapping under urgent gallop. Catharina. Lucian's voice, raw with fear that stripped away every layer of aristocratic control. Catharina, where are you? She screamed through the window gap, voice shredding. Here. The cottage. I'm in the cottage. The door splintered inward, oak giving way to desperate strength. Lucian burst through, wild-eyed, disheveled, magnificent in his terror. Behind him, 2 footmen and the estate manager, all breathing hard. He saw her on the chair and something in his face cracked, relief so profound it was almost pain, almost prayer. You're safe. He crossed the space in 3 strides, lifting her down with hands that trembled. His fingers ran over her arms, her face, her shoulders, checking for injury with frantic thoroughness. Thank God. When the ransom note arrived, when I thought, his voice broke completely. Ransom note? He pulled crumpled paper from his coat with shaking hands. £10,000 for your wife. Leave it at the Old Oak by midnight or find her body in the morning. Your choice. But I wasn't kidnapped for money, Catharina said slowly, pieces clicking together with sickening clarity. The man who locked me here said you'd pay for my return. He knew about the blackmail letter. He knew horror dawned like sunrise over a battlefield. This is all connected. William's death, the blackmail, Celeste. It's all her. Celeste? Lucian's voice went deadly quiet, dangerous as winter ice over deep water. Catharina told him everything. The letter she'd found in Eleanor's hand, the unsent suspicions about William's death. Mrs. Hollowell placing envelopes in files during midnight visits. The jasmine-scented note luring her to this trap. Each revelation fell like stones into dark water, creating ripples of horror. Eleanor suspected something was wrong, she finished, watching his face cycle through emotions too fast to name. And someone wanted to make sure she never pursued it. What if her suicide wasn't grief alone? What if someone helped her along? Encouraged her despair? Provided the laudanum? Lucian went white as death itself. You're saying Eleanor was murdered? I'm saying we need to find that gardener. Thomas Becket. He's the only witness to what really happened that day. She gripped his arms, feeling muscle and bone in terror beneath expensive fabric. If Celeste was there, if she had opportunity, we need to know. They rode back to the estate at speed that bordered on reckless. Lucian sent men to bring Becket from the village with instructions that brooked no delay. An hour later, longest hour of Catharina's life, the weathered 60-year-old man stood in the study, twisting his cap in gnarled hands. The smell of honest work and fear rolled off him. Mr. Becket, Lucian's voice was controlled fury wrapped in ice. I need the truth. All of it. What really happened the day William died? The old man's face crumbled like ancient parchment. Tears welled in eyes that had seen too much. My lord, I've carried this 3 years. The guilt, it's eaten me alive every single day, just tell me. Barely contained violence in those 3 words. Becket took a shaking breath, and Catharina thought, this is it. The moment everything changes. It wasn't the pond behind the rose garden, my lord. Young Master William went to the lake. The big one, near the north woods. Deep water there. Dangerous for a child. He paused, tears tracking through the dirt on his weathered face. I saw him heading that way with, he stopped. With who? Catharina pressed, though she already knew. Already felt the horror of it. With Lady Hawthorne, my lord. She was visiting that day, staying in the guest cottage. Said she'd watch him while you were hunting. Said you'd asked her to. I thought it was fine. She was your friend. He couldn't say it. She seemed to care for the boy. The air left Lucian's lungs in a rush. All color drained from his face, leaving him gray as ash. Celeste was watching William? Yes, my lord. I found the boy at the pond later because Lady Hawthorne told me to look there. Said he'd wandered off while she wasn't watching, said she turned her back for just a moment. Beckett's voice broke. But I always wondered, his clothes were different when I found him. The shirt he'd been wearing that morning was blue. The one on his body was white. And the pond was too shallow. A boy his age, even falling, couldn't drown there unless someone held him under. Lucian's words were ice-made sound. Catharina's mind raced, nausea rising. Celeste had motive. Lucian had rejected her, married Eleanor instead. Murdering his son would destroy him emotionally, make him vulnerable, break his marriage from the inside. And when Eleanor started asking dangerous questions, asking why the story didn't make sense, Celeste could have provided comfort. Could have provided laudanum. Could have encouraged the despair until it became fatal. But proof. They needed undeniable proof. Why didn't you speak up 3 years ago? Lucian demanded, each word clipped. Beckett's eyes filled with fresh tears. She paid me, my lord. £500, more money than I'd see in 10 years of work. Said if I told anyone the truth, she'd make sure I hanged for negligence in the boy's death. That she had connections in the courts. That she'd destroy my family. He broke down sobbing. I have 6 children, my lord. 6 mouths to feed. I was a coward. Before anyone could respond, the door burst open. Mrs. Hollowell stood there, face stricken with guilt and fear. My lord, there are visitors. From London. Her voice trembled. Lady Hawthorne has brought half of society to the estate. She's in the drawing room making accusations against Lady Catharina. They ran Lucian, Catharina, the footman. Down corridors, through halls, boots hammering on marble. The drawing room doors stood open. Inside, at least 20 members of the ton stood gawking as Celeste held court, magnificent in black silk that made her look like an avenging angel. Tears streamed down her perfect face with theatrical precision. I'm so sorry, she sobbed to Lord Pemberton and his horrified wife. I hoped it wasn't true. Prayed it wasn't. But Lady Catharina admitted it to me in confidence. She's been blackmailing poor Lucian. Threatening to spread vicious lies about William's death unless he gives her money. His own wife, using his grief against him like a weapon. Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Lady Pemberton clutched her husband's arm. How absolutely monstrous. I have proof, Celeste continued, producing letters with practiced drama. Letters in her handwriting demanding payment. She married him to extort him. The whole thing was calculated from the beginning. She saw a grieving widower and decided to make him pay, literally, for the rest of his life. Catharina stood frozen in the doorway. Every eye turned to her. The whispers started immediately, a tide of judgment she knew too well. Gambler's sister, fortune hunter, blackmailer, worse than we thought. The cycle repeating. Society's judgment, swift and merciless and hungry for blood. She thought, here we go again. Different scandal, same condemnation. At least I'm consistent. Lucian stepped forward, his presence commanding instant silence. Power rolled off him in waves. That's an interesting accusation, Celeste. Particularly from the woman who murdered my son. The room exploded. Shocked gasps. Someone's teacup shattered on the floor. Lord Pemberton stepped protectively in front of his wife as if murder might be contagious. Celeste's face went from grief-stricken to ice in a heartbeat, mask dropping to reveal the monster beneath. How dare you? Your grief has made you delusionally Thomas Becket, Lucian called, voice cutting through chaos. The gardener entered, looking like he might faint. Tell them what you told me. Every single word. Becket's weathered face was pale as death, but his voice carried clearly through the stunned silence. Lady Hawthorne was watching Master William the day he died. She told me to search the pond behind the rose garden. But the boy's clothes were wrong when I found him, different shirt entirely. And his hair smelled of lake water, not pond scum. Deep lake water. This is absurd, Celeste hissed, venom replacing tears. The ravings of a paid servant. You gave him £500 to stay silent, Catharina interjected, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She thought, now or never. Time to play the only cards I have. And you wrote those blackmail letters. The paper smells of jasmine, your signature scent. You had Mrs. Hollowell place them in files where Lucian would find them. You orchestrated everything. At the mention of her name, Mrs. Hollowell appeared in the doorway, trembling. Forgive me, my lord. She threatened to expose my son's theft from a previous employer. I had no choice. She said it was just a game, that she wanted to win you back. Everyone has choices. Lucian's voice was deadly quiet, each word a blade. He turned to face the assembled guests, and Catharina saw something new in him, not the cold Marquis, but a man pushed past breaking. Lady Hawthorne murdered my 4-year-old son because I refused to take her back after she married Lord Hawthorne for his fortune. She thought destroying my family would make me need her. Make me vulnerable enough to accept her back into my life. Prove it. Celeste snarled, her mask finally shattering completely. Beauty twisted into something monstrous. You have no proof. Just the word of servants and your desperate little bride who'd say anything to keep her hooks in your money. Catharina stepped forward, pulling a folded paper from her sleeve with hands that only trembled slightly. Eleanor's unsent letter to Dr. Whitmore. She suspected something was wrong. She wrote that the gardener's story didn't match what she saw that morning from her window. She held it up for all to see, and the room leaned forward collectively. What did Eleanor see, Celeste? Did she see you at the lake? Did she see what you did to a 4-year-old child? For one crystalline moment, Celeste's composure cracked. Rage twisted her beautiful face into something from nightmares, pure malice given human form. Then she lunged, not at Lucian, but at Catharina, fingers curved into claws. You ruined everything, she screamed, all pretense abandoned. Her carefully styled hair came loose, jasmine perfume nauseating as she closed the distance. He was supposed to be mine. Broken and desperate in mine. That brat was just an obstacle, just a stepping stone to what I deserved. 2 footmen caught her, but her shrieks echoed through the manor like a demon exorcised. I loved him. Everything I did was because I loved him. That child was nothing, a means to an end. And that pathetic wife of his, always crying, always weak, her laugh was unhinged, theatrical. The laudanum was a mercy. I did Eleanor a favor. She wanted to die, I just helped her along. Confession. Raw and terrible, witnessed by 20 members of the ton who'd never forget this spectacle. She thought, well, that was easier than expected. Villains really do love monologuing. Lord Pemberton's face was ashen. Someone fetch the magistrate. Immediately. This woman needs to be arrested. They dragged Celeste away, still screaming about love and betrayal and injustice. The guests departed in shocked silence, already composing the scandal that would dominate London for years. This would be the story people told their grandchildren. Finally, the drawing room was empty except for Lucian and Catharina. He turned to her, and she saw something in his face that made her heart stutter. Not just gratitude. Not just relief. Something deeper. More terrifying. Raw emotion without walls or masks or protection. You saved me, he said quietly, voice rough as gravel. From paying a murderer. From never knowing the truth. From living the rest of my life believing I'd killed my own son through negligence. Don't. Catharina held up a hand, suddenly overwhelmed. She was shaking, delayed shock finally hitting like a tidal wave. Don't thank me. I put myself in danger stupidly. I interfered in matters that weren't yours? His voice turned sharp, almost angry. You're my wife. William was your stepson, even if you never met him. His murder is absolutely your concern. You risked your life, weak from fever, barely able to stand, you risked everything to find the truth. But that's just it, she whispered, and suddenly tears came, hot and unstoppable. All the fear and exhaustion and desperate hope she'd been holding back crashed down. I'm your wife in name only. A convenient solution to your problems. Even now, after everything, you don't, her voice broke. You can't love me. You said so yourself. Women who need you don't ask inconvenient questions about love. Remember? The words hung between them like ghosts of conversations past. Lucian's face went carefully blank. That mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. Catharina, I can't do this anymore. The admission ripped from somewhere deep inside, from the place where hope had been slowly dying. I can't be married to someone who looks through me. Who holds my hand when I'm dying but locks the door between us when I'm well? Who defends my honor to society but keeps his heart locked away with his dead son's toys? She thought, I'm doing it. I'm actually saying all the things I swore I'd never say. Mother would be proud. Or horrified. Possibly both. That's not fair, isn't it? Tears fell freely now, hot and angry and liberating. I know you're grieving. I know you're terrified of losing someone again. But I'm terrified too. Terrified of falling in love with a man who will never love me back. Who will always see me as the consolation prize. The convenient bride who asked no difficult questions until she did. She backed toward the door, needing distance, needing air. I'm going home. To my mother and Caroline. For a few days. I need space. To think. To figure out if I can survive loving someone who might never love me in return. Don't. The word was strangled, desperate. Don't leave. Please. I'm asking, I'm begging, but she was already walking away, her footsteps echoing on marble floors like a countdown. Behind her, she heard him call her name once more, desperate, broken, raw. She didn't turn back. If she did, she'd stay. And staying meant slowly dying inside, loving a man who might never let himself love her in return. The house felt colder as she climbed the stairs. In the portrait gallery, she noticed for the first time, every painting of Eleanor was still turned to face the wall. Still hiding. Still haunting. Still winning, even in death. Lady Catharina stood at the edge of ruin, 24 hours from losing everything. Her brother's gambling debts, £43,000, had destroyed their family overnight. But the whispers cutting through the ballroom weren't about money. They were about the proposal she'd just received from England's wealthiest Marquis, marriage in exchange for her family's salvation. What society didn't know, what even she didn't know yet, was that his Gothic estate harbored secrets darker than bankruptcy. A child's death 3 years ago. A wife's mysterious suicide. And a locked nursery that no one dared enter. The man offering to save her had blood on his hands. The question was, whose blood, and would she be next? The carriage wheels crunched over gravel as Catharina fled Ashford Hall. She stared out the window as the Gothic towers grew smaller, disappearing into morning mist like a fever dream she was finally waking from. She'd packed one small trunk, just enough for propriety. Everything else could stay. She wanted nothing from him. Nothing except the heart she'd foolishly given away. The letter sat on his desk. She'd written it at dawn while the house slept, ink blotting where tears had fallen despite her best efforts. Lucian, I cannot be your wife in name only. I cannot watch you grieve forever while I slowly disappear into the wallpaper. You deserve happiness, but you have to choose it. I hope someday you do. See, 15 words. They felt both too much and not enough. Like trying to contain an ocean in a teacup. Her mother's townhouse was exactly as she'd left it months ago, shabby but clean, smelling of lavender and old memories and the peculiar scent of genteel poverty. Caroline threw herself into Catharina's arms, sobbing with relief that felt like absolution. "We thought you'd forgotten us," her younger sister whispered against her shoulder. "Married to a marquess, living in that huge estate. We thought you'd become someone else entirely. I could never forget you." Catharina held her close, breathing in Caroline's rose water perfume mixed with the cheaper soap they could now afford thanks to Lucian's money. Guilt twisted in her gut. "You're my family. My real family." Her mother appeared in the doorway, older and thinner than Catharina remembered. Grief and worry had carved new lines around her eyes and mouth. "Does your husband know you're here? I left him a letter." Understanding flickered across her mother's face, the look of a woman who'd seen this story before. "Ah. So it's like that. I fell in love with him, Mama." The confession hurt like swallowing glass shards. "And he can't love me back. Or won't. I'm not sure which is worse." She thought, actually, won't is definitely worse. Can't implies biology. Won't implies choice. Choice to keep hurting me every single day. That night, Catharina lay in her childhood bed, staring at familiar ceiling cracks she used to imagine were maps to imaginary countries. London sounds drifted through the window, horses, vendors, drunks singing off-key, life continuing while hers felt suspended in amber. She thought, how do you unknow someone? How do you stop seeing his face every time you close your eyes? Every woman who'd ever loved unwisely knew this particular torture, the inability to simply stop feeling. If only hearts came with off switches. 3 days passed. No word from Ashford Hall. No letter. No desperate ride through London to retrieve her. Just silence, thick and suffocating as London fog. On the 4th day, Caroline burst into her room waving a scandal sheet like a battle flag. "Cathy, look. It's about Lord Ashford." The headline screamed in sensational type, "Marquess Ashford's wife flees after murder revelation, society questions marriage stability." Catharina's hands trembled as she read. Some enterprising reporter had twisted the story, implying she'd left because she couldn't bear the scandal of Celeste's crimes, suggesting the marriage was already fractured before the murder came to light, insinuating weakness, cowardice, all the things society loved to attribute to women. Sources close to the family report the Marchioness departed alone, refusing the Marquess's attempts at reconciliation. One wonders if this convenient union is destined for the same tragic end as his first marriage. Perhaps some men are simply cursed in love. "That's lies," Caroline said hotly, 16-year-old indignation in every syllable. "Isn't it? He didn't try to stop you?" Before Catharina could answer, their ancient butler appeared, wheezing slightly. "My lady, you have a visitor. The Marquess of Ashford." Her heart stopped. Then galloped wildly, traitorously. "Tell him I'm not receiving, he says he'll wait." The butler's expression was carefully neutral, decades of service teaching him not to judge his employer's drama. "He's been outside for 2 hours. In the rain." Rain. She crossed to the window, Caroline following like a curious puppy. There, standing on the street below, heedless of the downpour, was Lucian. No carriage. No umbrella. No servants. Just him in the pouring rain, staring up at her window like a penitent at church. Soaked through, hair plastered to his skull, coat heavy with water. Utterly still except for the rise and fall of his chest. Waiting. How long will he stand there? Caroline whispered beside her, awed. As long as it takes, I imagine. Catharina's voice cracked. He's nothing if not stubborn. Also possibly insane. That combination runs in aristocratic families. Another hour passed. Thunder rolled. Lightning split the sky. He didn't move. Didn't seek shelter. Just stood in the downpour like a statue commissioned to represent regret or possibly idiocy. Passers-by stared. A few recognized him, whispers spreading. The Marquess of Ashford, standing in the rain like a lovesick fool. Tomorrow's scandal, today. She thought, this is either the most romantic thing I've ever seen or the most manipulative. Possibly both. Men are complicated like that. Finally, Catharina couldn't bear it. She grabbed his shawl and ran downstairs, out into the rain that hit her like tiny cold fists. He saw her coming. Something broke across his face, hope, fear, desperation tangled together in an expression so raw it hurt to witness. "You're getting pneumonia," she said, rain already soaking through her dress, plastering fabric to skin. "I don't care." His voice was raw, scraped over gravel. "I needed you to see. That I'd wait. That I'd stand here until you believed what?" He stepped closer, and she could see he'd been crying. Water streamed down his face, impossible to tell rain from tears, but his eyes were red-rimmed, swollen. "That I love you. That I'm terrified and broken and completely, desperately, impossibly in love with you." The words hit like lightning. Catharina couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The world reduced to rain in his face and those three impossible words. "I didn't know how until you left," he continued, voice breaking with each syllable. "I thought protecting my heart was survival. Self-preservation. But you were right, I was just slowly dying inside, mistaking numbness for safety. And when you walked away, I finally understood. I'd rather risk everything and love you than live safely without you. I'd rather drown in feeling than continue this half-life of careful distance. Lucian, I'm still grieving William. I probably always will. Some wounds don't close, they just become part of who you are." Rain poured over them both, cold and cleansing. "But he wouldn't want me to stop living. To stop loving. To lock myself away like those toys in the nursery, frozen in time, gathering dust." His hands framed her face, wet, warm, trembling. "You brought light back into that mausoleum. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. You're brave and fierce and stubborn and everything I don't deserve but desperately need." She thought, this is it. The moment I either believe or walk away forever. The moment that defines the rest of my life. "You can't just, I love you." He said it again, fiercer, almost angry with the intensity. "I love how you defend people who can't defend themselves. I love your stubborn pride that won't let you settle. I love that you'd rather leave than accept half a marriage. I love you, Catharina. Completely. Terrifyingly. Forever." Rain pounded around them. Her neighbors were definitely watching from windows. This would be tomorrow's scandal, next week's gossip, next year's story people told at parties. She didn't care. "Say something," he whispered, desperate. "Please. Even if it's goodbye. Just say something." She kissed him. The kiss was rain and heat and 3 months of hunger finally unleashed. His hands tangled in her wet hair, pulling her closer with desperate need. She tasted salt, rain or tears or both, impossible to tell and irrelevant. Her fingers gripped his soaked coat, anchoring herself against the storm of emotion threatening to sweep her away into madness. When they finally broke apart, both gasping like drowning victims reaching air, Lucian pressed his forehead to hers. Water dripped from his nose onto hers, unsexy, human, perfect. "Come home. Please. Let me spend the rest of my life proving I meant every word." "You're shivering," she whispered, noticing for the first time how violently he trembled, cold seeping into his bones from hours standing like an idiot in a thunderstorm. "I don't care." His teeth chattered slightly, undermining the romantic declaration. But she did. She thought, well, dying of pneumonia would put a damper on our reconciliation. Practical concerns intrude even on grand romantic gestures. She took his hand, that simple gesture feeling more intimate than any kiss, and led him inside. Her mother took one look at them dripping on the entrance hall floor like wet cats and simply smiled. "I'll have tea sent up. And dry clothes for his lordship." She squeezed Catharina's shoulder. "Bring him home, darling. But only if he's earned it." An hour later, they sat in the small parlor wrapped in blankets. Lucian wore Thomas's old dressing gown, comically short on his taller frame, exposing several inches of ankle. His hair was drying in unruly waves she'd never seen before, making him look younger. Vulnerable. Absurdly handsome despite looking like a drowned aristocrat. She thought, I'm in love with a man who stands in rainstorms and wears borrowed dressing gowns. My standards have evolved considerably. I need to tell you something, he said, cradling a teacup in both hands like it might escape. About the night Eleanor died. I've never told anyone the full truth. Catharina waited, giving him space to find words for whatever darkness he'd been carrying. She knew about Celeste and William. Not the murder, she didn't realize that part. But she knew Celeste had been there that day at the lake. She'd seen them together from her bedroom window. His voice was hollow, echoing with old pain. Eleanor confronted me. Asked if I'd ever loved Celeste more than her. If I'd married her as second choice. As the consolation prize after Celeste chose money over me. What did you tell her? The truth. That I'd loved Celeste once, before I knew what love really meant. That it was infatuation, surface attraction, nothing with depth or staying power. He set down the cup, hands shaking. I told Eleanor she and William had taught me what love actually was: selfless, consuming, terrifying in its vulnerability. That comparing her to Celeste was like comparing the ocean to a puddle. Thunder rumbled outside, punctuating his confession. But she was already so fragile. The grief had eaten away at her sanity like acid on metal. She didn't believe me. Couldn't believe anyone would choose her. His hands clenched into fists. That night, she took the laudanum. I found her in the morning, cold and gone. And I've carried the guilt that my honesty killed her. That if I just lied, told her what she wanted to hear regardless of truth, she'd still be alive. Tears tracked down his face. So I locked everything away. Built walls so high nothing could reach me. Convinced myself that loving was the danger, not Celeste's manipulation, not Eleanor's illness, not my own failure to see how badly she was struggling. Just love itself. Until you. Catharina moved to sit beside him, taking his hand in both of hers. Eleanor's death wasn't your fault. Celeste's manipulation, William's murder, the unbearable grief, those destroyed her. Not your honesty. Never your honesty. How do you forgive so easily? I don't forgive easily. But I understand that grief makes people do terrible things to themselves. She squeezed his fingers. And I understand that loving you means accepting all of you. The grief, the guilt, the fear, the occasional idiotic gesture involving rain. All of it. He turned to face her fully, cupping her cheek with surprising gentleness. I don't deserve you. Probably not. A small smile, the first in days. But you're stuck with me anyway. I signed a contract. Very official. Your solicitors were quite thorough. The almost laugh that escaped him sounded rusty, like a machine learning to work again after years of disuse. They returned to Ashford Hall the next morning. Together. The staff lined up to welcome them, Mrs. Hollowell notably absent, dismissed for her role in the blackmail scheme. A new housekeeper curtsied nervously, clearly terrified of disappointing them. But the real challenge waited in London like a guillotine. Society had devoured the scandal like starving wolves given fresh meat. Celeste's arrest, the murder revelation, Catharina's flight and return, it was the most delicious gossip in decades. Invitations dried up overnight. Cut direct on the street became common as breathing. Even families who'd attended that fateful dinner party now claimed they'd suspected something was wrong all along. Convenient revisionist history. The ultimate test came 3 weeks later, a royal reception at Buckingham Palace. Attendance was mandatory for peers of Lucian's rank. Refusal would confirm guilt in society's eyes, imply they were ashamed, hiding, admitting fault. We don't have to go, Lucian said as Catharina dressed in emerald silk, the same gown from that disastrous dinner party. She'd chosen it deliberately, defiantly. Yes, we do. She met his eyes in the mirror, chin lifted. We face them together. Show them we're not ashamed. That we survived and we're stronger for it. That their judgment has no power over us anymore. The ballroom glittered with England's elite crystal chandeliers, gold leaf, enough diamonds to bankrupt a small country. Conversation died when they entered. Every eye turned. Whispers erupted like wildfire spreading through dry grass. Murderer's friend, that's the wife who left him, scandalous, inappropriate. Catharina's chin lifted higher. She thought, let them stare. Let them judge. I know the truth. We know the truth. And that's enough. Their opinions are just noise, meaningless static from people whose lives are so boring they need our drama to feel alive. They moved through the crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea. Some people turned away, cutting them deliberately, the social equivalent of spitting. Others watched with morbid fascination, probably hoping for a dramatic scene they could report tomorrow. Lord Pemberton nodded respectfully. He testified against Celeste at the trial, earning him some moral high ground. Then the Queen entered, and the room fell into cathedral silence. Victoria was smaller than Catharina expected, barely 5 feet tall, draped in black mourning silk even 8 years after Prince Albert's death. But her presence commanded absolute authority. One didn't need height when one had the power of an empire. The Queen's gaze swept across the assembly, pausing deliberately, pointedly on Lucian and Catharina. Her expression was unreadable as stone. A courtier whispered in her ear. Her lips tightened into a line. Marquess Ashford, the Queen's voice carried across marble floors like divine judgment. Approach. It wasn't a request. It was a summons that could end careers, destroy reputations, exile families. Lucian's hand found Catharina's, squeezing once, communication without words, before he stepped forward. She watched him bow deeply before the monarch who could destroy them with a sentence. Your Majesty. His voice was steady, giving away nothing. We have heard disturbing reports about your household. The Queen's German accent colored each word with old-world authority. Murder. Scandal. A wife who abandons her duties. Such behavior reflects poorly on the peerage. The ballroom held its collective breath. This was it, the moment society had been waiting for with bated breath. Public condemnation from the Queen herself. Social death, official and irreversible. Catharina's heart hammered. She thought, this is how reputations die. One royal sentence and we're finished. Exiled from society forever. But underneath the fear, something else burned: anger at the injustice. At being judged for surviving while the real villain sat in prison. With respect, Your Majesty, Lucian's voice grew stronger, louder, carrying to every corner, the reports you've heard are incomplete. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one contradicted the Queen. Ever. This was social suicide witnessed in real time. Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. Explain yourself, Marquis. Lady Celeste Hawthorne murdered my 4-year-old son 3 years ago. She murdered my first wife by encouraging her suicide and providing the means. And she attempted to blackmail and destroy my current marriage through manipulation and lies. He turned, extending his hand toward Catharina, an invitation, a plea, a declaration. My wife uncovered the truth at great personal risk. She walked into a kidnapping trap trying to protect me. She solved murders the authorities had dismissed as accidents. She saved my life in every way that matters. Catharina moved forward, drawn by his outstretched hand like a moth to flame. Their fingers intertwined, united front against the most powerful woman in the British Empire. She thought, well, if we're going to be exiled, at least we'll go down spectacularly. Future generations will tell this story at parties. Lucian continued, his voice carrying to every corner with aristocratic command. Society whispers that she married me for money. That I married her for convenience. They're half right. It began as a transaction, cold, calculated, mutually beneficial. But Catharina taught me something I'd forgotten after losing my son, that love isn't safe. It's terrifying and dangerous and the only thing worth risking everything for. Marquess Ashford, the Queen began, warning in her tone. I'm not finished. The audacity of interrupting the Queen made someone behind them whimper audibly. Several people looked faint. My wife stands accused by gossips who know nothing. They call her a fortune hunter. A scandal. A woman who abandoned her husband. But I call her the bravest person I've ever known. She faced a murderer. She faced poverty with dignity when her family lost everything. And she faced my grief without flinching when I pushed her away at every turn. He released Catharina's hand, turning fully to the assembled crowd. Power radiated from him, not the cold authority of before, but something warmer. More human. More dangerous. So judge us if you must. Cut us from your guest lists. Whisper behind your fans. Spread your poison. But know this: every word you speak against my wife, you speak against me. And I will defend her honor against anyone. He paused, meeting the Queen's eyes directly. Even if necessary, Your Majesty herself. The silence was absolute. No one breathed. Time itself seemed suspended. Challenging the Queen was social suicide, political suicide, possibly literal suicide depending on her mood. Victoria stared at Lucian for what felt like eternity. Thunder rumbled outside, perfectly dramatic timing. Then, impossibly, her stern face softened. Something like approval flickered in her eyes. The Marquis has quite the romantic streak. We had not realized. She looked at Catharina. Approach, Marchioness. Catharina's legs trembled as she stepped forward, sinking into the deepest curtsy of her life. Your Majesty. Look at us. She raised her eyes. The Queen studied her with surprising gentleness, searching for something. We lost our beloved Albert 8 years ago, Victoria said quietly, her voice carrying emotion she rarely showed publicly. We understand grief. How it consumes. How it convinces you that loving again betrays the dead. Her voice grew stronger, addressing the room. But we also understand that love honors the dead by living fully. Your husband has learned this lesson. Have you? Tears pricked Catharina's eyes. She thought, the Queen of England is asking about my feelings. This day cannot get stranger. Yes, Your Majesty. He taught me that bravery isn't fearlessness. It's loving despite the terror. It's choosing vulnerability over safety. It's standing in the rain until someone believes you. A smile ghosted across Victoria's lips, rare as diamonds, precious beyond measure. Well said. She raised her voice, addressing the ballroom with absolute authority. Let it be known, we find no fault with the Marquis and Marchioness of Ashford. They have endured tragedy with dignity and exposed a murderer among our ranks. Any who question their honor questions ours. The pronouncement was absolute. Royal approval, given publicly, irreversibly. Within seconds, the crowd surged forward. Suddenly everyone wanted to congratulate them, apologize for doubts, claim they'd supported them all along. Convenient amnesia and social climbing at its finest. But Catharina barely noticed the sudden popularity. She was staring at Lucian, who was staring back at her with an expression that made her heart stop. Pride. Love. Wonder. Gratitude. Everything she'd hoped to see and more. He'd risked everything. Title, position, the Queen's favor, all for her. 1 year later, autumn painted Ashford Hall in gold and crimson like a landscape from a dream. Catharina stood at the nursery window, the room that had been locked for 3 years, frozen in time and grief. Now it was open, filled with afternoon sunlight and the sound of infant babbling. She cradled her newborn son against her chest, breathing in that distinctive baby scent of milk and innocence and infinite possibility. Thomas Lucian Ashford. Named for her brother who'd found redemption working honestly in Lucian's shipping business. Named for the father who'd learned to love again despite terror. He has your eyes, Lucian said softly, appearing behind her like he always did, quiet, present, real. His arms wrapped around them both, wife and child, creating a circle of warmth that felt like coming home. And your stubborn chin. She leaned back against him, marveling at how natural this felt. How right. How impossible it had seemed a year ago. The rocking horse William had played with still stood in the corner, lovingly restored. But now it was joined by new toys, new life, new hope. They hadn't erased William's memory. They'd honored it by living fully, by choosing joy alongside grief. Do you think he'd approve? Lucian asked quietly, understanding without explanation that she'd been thinking of his first son. I think he'd be happy you're happy. Catharina turned in his arms, careful not to jostle the sleeping baby. I think both Eleanor and William would want you to have this. A second chance. A family. A life not defined by loss. Over the past year, they'd done the hard work of healing. Lucian had opened the nursery gradually, spending hours talking to Catharina about William, his laugh, his favorite games, the way he'd called butterflies flutterbies. Sharing those memories had transformed them from painful ghosts into cherished treasures, from weights into wings. Celeste had been sentenced to life imprisonment. The scandal had rocked London for months before fading into history, as scandals always did. Some people still whispered, but most had moved on to fresher gossip. The Ton had the attention span of goldfish when not personally entertained. Caroline had made her successful debut, attracting 3 suitable suitors and choosing the kindest one, a young baron who made her laugh. Thomas had married a woman who didn't care about his past mistakes, who saw him as he was now rather than who he'd been. Their mother hosted weekly dinners where both families gathered, loud and imperfect and wonderfully, messily alive. I never thought I'd feel this again, Lucian whispered, kissing her temple. This lightness. This peace. This hope for tomorrow. Peace isn't the absence of pain, Catharina said softly, words she'd learned through experience. It's finding joy despite it. Learning that grief and love can coexist. That you don't have to choose between remembering the past and embracing the future. She understood now what her mother had meant about protecting pieces of yourself in marriage. But with Lucian, she didn't need to protect anything. She could be wholly herself, brave and broken, strong and scared, loving and loved in return without conditions or reservations. Baby Thomas stirred, making small mooling sounds that dissolved adult conversation into baby-focused cooing. Lucian took him gently, cradling him with the practiced ease of a man who'd done this before but appreciated it more deeply this time, knowing how fragile and precious it was. Hello, little one, he murmured. Welcome to a family that fought hard to be here. To be happy. To choose love over fear every single day. Catharina watched them, her husband and son, and felt something settle deep in her chest. Not the wild passion of new love, but something richer. Deeper. The kind of love that weathered storms and grew stronger in broken places, that new scars were proof of survival rather than shame. She thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, standing alone at that ball, certain her life was over, that she'd become nothing but her brother's shame. About how sometimes the worst moments led to unexpected grace. How rock bottom could be a foundation instead of an ending. How the things we think will destroy us sometimes save us instead. Through the window, she could see the gardens coming back to life. Lucian had hired new gardeners, opened the grounds to light and air and careful tending. The pond where William had died was now surrounded by willow trees and a memorial bench engraved with his name. A place to remember, not avoid. A place to honor, not fear. Healing wasn't forgetting. It was integration. Taking the broken pieces and creating something new from them. Something beautiful precisely because it bore the marks of having been shattered and carefully, lovingly rebuilt. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose and gold, Catharina realized something profound. This was happiness. Not the absence of sorrow, but the presence of love strong enough to hold both joy and grief. The courage to be vulnerable. The wisdom to know that perfection was a lie, but this messy, complicated, hard-won love was real. And real was enough. Real was everything. Lucian pressed his lips to her hair, breathing her in. I love you. More than I thought possible to love anyone. More than words can adequately express. I know. She smiled up at him, seeing her future reflected in his eyes. And I love you. All of you. The grief, the healing, the man who stood in the rain until I believed. The father who learns to love again. The husband who chose bravery over safety. Baby Thomas yawned, oblivious to the profound moment his parents were sharing. In his innocence, he was already teaching them the greatest lesson, that life continued. That hope renewed itself in every breath, every heartbeat, every new beginning. that love was always worth the risk. They stood together as darkness fell gently over Ashford Hall. A family forged from tragedy, strengthened by honesty, and bound by love that had learned to bloom in the darkest soil. The future stretched before them, uncertain, imperfect, but theirs to write together. And that was more than enough. That was everything.